Greetings, Otaku Faithful. Thank you for joining me again this week. Once again, it's Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief, and I'm actually here to bring you the first in my new weekly Boardwalk Empire Season 2 episode reviews right here on Otaku Assemble! Weekly. As always, here to bring you the latest in this week's Boardwalk Empire episode review. And I have to say, it is such a pleasure to have Boardwalk Empire finally back on the air. Season 2 kicked off tonight, and it was a very interesting episode, I must say, for the Season 2 premiere. So before I jump into my actual review of this episode, I just want to I need to make a few things clear about how I'm going to approach this review. First off, I'm just going to I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to jump into this review as if my viewers, as if you all are already familiar with the series. The reason for that being is that in order for me to recap or to sum up everything that happened in Season 1 would take a lot of time. I mean, honestly, I should probably do like a Season 1 review, which I probably will do later on down the line. Perhaps I might even do it much like I attempted to do with the Sons of Anarchy reviews, where I would review the previous seasons right before the new season starts. So maybe that's something I can attempt later on down the line, is to review Season 1. But just for the sake of time constraints, I'm just going to go ahead and come into this episode review as if you all have already seen Season 1. Which means I'll be talking about the characters as if you already know who they are, so on and so forth, just to kind of, make the review move a little bit more smoothly. Also, like I always do in my Sons of Anarchy reviews and my Thundercast episode reviews, this review is based off of a single screening. I've only seen this episode once, so this entire review will be based off of one viewing. And I think for the most part that should cover everything you need to know before I jump into this review. So let's just go ahead and do the damn thing. Now this, like I said, it's the Season 2 premiere and it's entitled 21. Now what occurs in this week's episode? A few things worth mentioning. Now number one, first thing we get out of the gate in this week's episode is that Chalky, the prominent African American character in the series, and as you all know, he works for Nucky. Well, Chalky's operation gets attacked by some Klansmen, and this sets up a nice little. I guess you could call it a hiccup, kind of, because it hasn't appeared to be a major problem for Nucky yet. But we find out later in this episode that in fact the Commodore was the one who set up that attack on Chalky's operation. The reason for doing that being is this: what the Commodore is doing at this time, if you all will recall the Season 1 finale, the Commodore, Jimmy, and Eli are joining forces to bring down Nucky. What they're planning on doing right now is that they're gathering all their forces. They're aligning they're setting up their alliances. They're getting certain people on their side so that when this whole thing comes to blows, they got backup. And that's what the Commodore did in this week's episode. He went ahead and he hooked up with the Klansmen, getting that little connection, right? And so what he did was sent them after Chalky to wreck Chalky's operation, and by doing so hurt Nucky. How did he do this? Well, of course, like I said, the whole their whole operation pretty much got shut down indefinitely, well, until further notice, because of the attack. But also, this put Nucky in a very funny situation, because we saw Nucky in this episode. He had to play both sides of the coin. On one side, he was completely sympathetic to or well, no, not completely sympathetic, but he appeared to be sympathetic towards Chalky's cause, right? However, he turned around and tried and spit the opposite bullshit on the Klansmen to try and stay within their good graces. You see what I'm saying? He's playing both sides of the coin right now, and I got a feeling that's gonna bite him in the ass later on in this season. But Nucky's notorious for doing that. We've seen him do that throughout season 1, where you have two feuding parties, and he'll play both sides so that he can get what he wants, which for the most part is peace. Anytime a conflict appears to screw or jeopardize his potential operation, he wants to go ahead and nip that in the bud right then and there. But I got a feeling this is going to bite him in the ass later on in the season. And Chalky actually made a threat towards him, telling him that because four of his guys were murdered and countless others were injured. And he told him, he's like, look, man, if I decide to take my family, take my people, you could have a serious problem on your hands, because of course, Atlantic City has so many African American citizens in it. And of course, that is a very weird title for a song. I'm made of wax, Larry, what? By a day to remember. What the? Okay, I'm sorry, but that just, what the hell? Okay, anyway, so like I said, Chalky, yes, he threatened Nucky with a potential uprising. And also Eli tried to make that apparent to Nuck. It's like, hey man, we need to take care of this situation right here and now, because we could have a potential uprising on our hands, which led to Nucky playing both sides of the coin. So that's then and that. But also another thing worth mentioning, like I said, the Commodore, he's trying to set up his alliances. He's trying to make sure he got all the right players in the right in the right places and whatnot. And he sends Jimmy to the funeral of the Klanman that Chalky killed. And that's when we had this nice little scene where Nucky pretty much confronted Jimmy. And okay, here's the thing. I did not expect for Nucky to start suspecting that Jimmy, the Commodore, and Eli were working against him so soon. In episode 1 of season 2, we already see that Nucky has suspicions about Jimmy. And like I said, did not expect that to happen so soon. I figured this would have been something that would have occurred probably a third into the season. But no, out the gate, he can already tell something's going on, because one thing that we find out in the conversation with him and Jimmy is the fact that Jimmy got married in between season 1 and season 2. Jimmy got married. However, he hasn't really been around Nucky that much. And that's the thing, because Nucky, when he was talking to, Mrs. Schroeder earlier, well, not earlier, later on in the episode, he told her, he was like, that kid used to confide in me for everything. So for him to be as secretive as he is now, it's like something's going on. Something's going on. And honestly, it's not like Jimmy's trying to hide anything from him. I don't think Jimmy is. Honestly, Jimmy does not come across as the type of character that would really put, he's not the type to sneak around and, connive and scheme and shit like that. That's not really Jimmy's MO. So I don't think he's trying to hide that from Nucky. But what I'm saying is, he's not making it apparent either that, yes, he is opposing him. So, okay, so let's see, what else worth mentioning without giving too much away, because I do, in case you guys haven't seen this episode, I do still want you guys to check this out. Also, another thing, got to talk about, we got to look over at Chicago. We saw Capone and Nucky's, his affiliates in Chicago. Apparently, they're getting ready to set up a new deal with a cat out in Cincinnati. And we see in that scene that Capone has been ordered to go to Atlantic City and pretty much break off the deal with Nucky. which if you've seen the trailer for, if you've seen the promotion for this season, that that's coming up in the next couple of episodes, because we've seen like Nucky and Capone talking face to face, trying to set up a business deal and whatnot. But you see what I'm saying? It's like this episode is giving us the bits and pieces that will eventually lead up to Nucky's downfall, air quotes, quote unquote, his downfall, because here he has, his connection in Chicago that he does a lot of business with. They're getting ready to do business with another cat in Cincinnati. They're, another town. Okay? And then, like I mentioned earlier, the whole thing with Chalky and what happened with his operation, he's getting ready to pull his guys from working for Nucky. And then there's also the scene when Jimmy and his crew were taking over Chalky's operation. It's like, it seems like little by little, shit's starting to break up. Shit is starting to break up. And then, of course, let's see, what else did we get in this episode? Now, the whole thing with little Teddy Schroeder, that whole thing, I mean, yeah, I guess I could mention that because, Teddy was acting, it's funny because this is the first episode where we've actually seen, like, Mrs. Schroeder's children actually play a somewhat significant role. Little Teddy, he's been acting up in school and whatnot, and Nucky, towards the end of the episode, he tries to reach out to him. The reason why I'm bringing this up is not really that big of an important detail, but the reason why I'm bringing it up is because it draws a parallel between, what Nucky reaching out to little Teddy draws a parallel to when Nucky was trying to reach out to Jimmy in that conversation that I mentioned earlier that took place in the episode. And at the end of this episode, we find out that the wedding gift that he sent Jimmy was, not only did he send him a nice thick envelope of money, but he sent him this statue, statue sculpture figurine of a father and a son hunting deer. And the reason for that being is because earlier in the conversation that I mentioned that Jimmy and Nucky had, Jimmy mentioned that he took his son hunting and fishing, just like Nucky used to take Jimmy when he was a little boy. You see what I'm saying? So that's why I brought up the thing with Teddy, because it draws a parallel to what's going on with Nucky and Jimmy. Oh! Nelson! Let's not forget Agent Nelson. Man, okay. Shit. This was probably my favorite part of this episode. Okay, Nelson, Agent Van Alden, Nelson Van Alden. Nelson had his wife visit him in Atlantic City, and he's showing her around and whatnot. But the scene there's a scene in this episode when they're in a restaurant, and he finds out that apparently that restaurant does sell liquor, and his wife says, "Oh, aren't you going to arrest the guy?" And he's like, "We're having dinner. I'm not really working right now. Just be cool." And then he goes, he's like, "Man, I gotta go to the restroom. I'll be right back." Okay. Well, we find out later that when he comes back, and after they've eaten, he mentions to the waiter, he's like, "Hey, you mentioned earlier that you sell certain things for the occasion." He's like, "Oh yeah, man." He's like, "Well, what about some like champagne or whiskey or something, for our 13th anniversary, because it was their wedding anniversary." And he says, "Oh yeah, we can set that up." And then, oh my God. Okay, I'm not gonna lie. This is badass. I thought this was badass. Van Alden grabs the dude, slams his head against the table, and then instantly his boys kick down the door, bust up in the restaurant. "Everybody get down on the knees. This is a raid." Has one of the agents go kick in the back door. The whole back of the restaurant filled from the ceiling to the floor with alcohol. He's like, "Man, it's stuffed in here, man." And then Van Alden laid down the law on them cats, and his wife was so like impressed, and she was like, "Oh my God." And the next scene, all you saw was the headboard of the hotel bed banging up against the wall, and you hear the springs, the mattress springs squeaking and shit, and you see the little card that lets you know that it's the hotel that they're staying in, and I was like, "Oh man." And then And then it cuts to the scene where Agent Van Alden is pressing on the spring of the bed, and he's like, see, I told you these springs were broke. I was like, oh my God, HBO, congratulations. That is some storytelling for your ass, man. They all do. See, HBO is really good at that type of shit. Now, of course, you know, Agent Van Alden and his wife did get it on later on that night. But what I'm saying is, that little scene making us think is, you have to see it. I told you what happened, but you don't get the full effect until you fucking see it. Oh, man. That storytelling, that's probably gonna be the title for this video. Storytelling. Well, never mind. The title for this video is going to be anyway. But yes, this is HBO's storytelling at its best. Man, that was so fucking clever. Bravo, HBO. Bravo. So clever. Oh man. Okay, so then. How did this episode wrap up? Okay, like I said, we saw Jimmy pretty much, I would assume, completely taking over Chalky's operation. And then, oh man, yes, gotta mention this. The episode ends with Nucky getting arrested by it's not the Atlantic, of course, Nucky would never get arrested by the Atlantic City Police Department. Thank you. He would never get arrested by them. Why? Because his brother Eli's the sheriff. But he could, I believe it was the state attorney. And yeah, I think it was like the state attorney. You know, it was a power outside of his jurisdiction. And they arrested Nucky for election fraud, because as you all will recall in season 1, you know, he helped what was the cat's name? Mr. Bader. I forget his first name, but he helped him get elected. And yeah, apparently he got arrested for election fraud. Now, we don't know what they have on him. We don't know what proof. We don't know what evidence. We don't know if they have, you know, witnesses or anything like that, because that's how this episode ended, with him getting arrested. But if you take all the little elements that I mentioned earlier on in this review, and then you add Nucky's arrest on top of that, you can see how this, like it's setting up, like it's coming in, you know, it's coming together so perfectly. You can see this shit setting up, and man, it's going to be a really interesting season. It really is. I'm sitting here trying to figure out where, you know, what all could possibly happen. But honestly, you know, especially with an HBO series, man, the possibilities for what could potentially happen in this series are endless, you know. So I did check out the preview for next week's episode, but I'm not going to mention that because otherwise, you know, I'd lose some of what to talk about for next week. But yeah, I mean, that pretty much sums up this first episode for the most part. I mean, yeah, I think that's every major thing. Without, there were a few other things in this episode that really did catch my attention, but I'm not going to mention those in that review because I want you guys to check it out for yourselves. And also, guys, in the comments below, you know, some of the things like you know, the conversation with Jimmy's wife and his mom, or the scene with Jimmy's, you know, right-hand man when he was making his little scrapbook. Those two scenes really did pique my interest. Let me know what y'all thought about those, because I was sitting there like, why are they mentioning this? What? Oh, and then the scene with Nucky's his stash in the closet. Why would they show that to us? Do you follow? Like, there's a reason why we saw that scene, you know. That's going to show up in the future. But those three little scenes also really, really intrigued me. So guys, let me know what you all thought about that. And so yeah, guys, thanks for joining me again this week. Like I said, in the comments below, first off, let me know how I did on this video. Let me know how I did on this episode review, because this is my first Boardwalk Empire episode review. So, want to know how I did. Guys, let me know. Also, let me know what you thought about this week's episode, about those scenes. What did you guys think about those? Where do you think, like, just off of this episode alone, where do you think the season's going to go, Also, who are you rooting for? Are you rooting for Jimmy, the Commodore, Eli? Are you rooting for their side? Are you rooting for Nucky's side? I mean, I'm not saying that the sides are so, black and white. I mean, fuck, there's 1,000 shades of gray. But, I mean, you got to be pulling for somebody. With this type of series, these series that are character-driven, you got to be rooting for somebody. Me personally, I'm rooting for Jimmy. Not so much, the whole idea that Jimmy, the Commodore, and Eli are all on one side. Not so much that idea. Honestly, I can't really back anybody who backs Klansmen. So I'm not really, pulling for like the Commodore. I'm kind of pulling for Eli because I like Eli. I always have liked Eli. But more so, I'm rooting for Jimmy. Whatever Jimmy decides to do, that's what I'm pulling for. Because Jimmy is my favorite character. Surprisingly, because I do love Steve Buscemi. I do love his portrayal of Nucky. Won him an Emmy. Okay. But no, Jimmy has always been my favorite of this series. So I'm pulling for my man Jimmy. But guys, let me know who are you pulling for? And so also quick announcement. Tomorrow night, I will attempt my first ever NFL recap video. I got a feeling that's going to be more of a rant. Because, let's just say, earlier today when I was watching the games, which was kind of funny, I was watching 4 games at once. Very confusing. Not as easy as you might think. So, very confusing. But let's just say the football performances this week, yeah, really disappointing, really disappointing. Yeah, I got a feeling my NFL recap video is gonna be more of a rant, but we'll find out. And then of course Tuesday, Sons of Anarchy review. But that'll do it for me right here on OAW. And as always, comment, rate, subscribe. Be sure to look me up on Facebook, facebook.com/otakuassemble, twitter.com/otakuassemble, talktv.com/otakuassemble, and then of course otaku_assemble on Skype. But with that said, this is Larry Williams, OAW Commander-in-Chief, signing off, and I'll catch you cats later. Peace.